get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for introducing yourself so far. My name is Supreet. I am volunteering as the National Organizing Director for Rent Strike 2020. Before we start, I want to get a few conflicts out of the way. I also work for Bernie's campaign, but my volunteer role here is in no way connected. Our rent strike is in no way connected to Bernie 2020 campaign. Just want to get that out up ahead. And I'm doing this in my volunteer capacity. We needed somebody to run the call, and since I'd done this before, I volunteered my skills for it. Today we have 3 people on the call: Rob, Rook, who I have to get a confirmation that he's actually on, Councilmember Kshama, House Delegate Lee Carter, and we'll go a little, because there was a lot of misinformation about what we were trying to do. So we want to take this opportunity to clarify all of that. So how rent strike started actually by one of the candidates of Rose Caucus putting out a petition to demand governors to freeze rents, because even though there were eviction moratoriums being passed everywhere in every state, people were not, once the moratorium is lifted, people would still have to pay their rents and mortgages and utilities in back pay. So once the petition was put out, it went viral. We got over 2 million signatures, and immediately Rose Caucus and Joshua Collins, the candidate who also helped to start this, immediately passed it off to organizers so that there was no appearance of opportunism, or so it didn't come off as rent strike is just trying to use these emails to run any candidates, which is why we made it very clear when we sent out petitions that we will not share these lists with any elected, any candidate, any organization. We will use this expressly for organizing rent strikes all across the country, and we're going to stick to that promise. Even though it'll lose us some allies, to be honest. So once this took off, Joshua Collins and Rose Caucus passed it off to independent organizers, and we immediately started putting an infrastructure so we could make sure that when people are struggling, they know their rights, they know how to not just give in and lose their homes and livelihoods, but know how to fight back. So just on that, I would like to take a few minutes on what's at stake. There was our Treasury Secretary mentioned that unemployment might reach 30% due to COVID-19, which is worse than the Depression. And either we can sit by like we did in 2008 and allow millions of people to be foreclosed on, lose their jobs, factories get closed on permanently, and have no way to come back from that or fight back. Or we can this time very early on organize and make it very clear that we are not going to stand for corporate handouts and bailouts for Wall Street. We want a bailout for regular working people. We want to make sure that people stay in their homes, get their whatever they make compensated if they lose their jobs, and we fight for long-term big structural change, essentially long-term structural change that would reorganize our economy in a way that it is more resilient in crises like this, or when there is a depression, that every time the market crashes, it doesn't hurt regular working people who often don't own stocks in Wall Street anyway. So that's the stake of the moment. So our demands, as some of you might have already gone on our website, but we have
Did we just lose Supreet?
Yeah, she froze up for just a minute.
Okay,
she's
back.
I did. Yep. My laptop
she's back.
She's back.
Okay.
Yep.
Continue.
Sorry about that. So we this started as a simple demand for a freeze on rents, mortgage, and utilities, but we realized that this is a moment where we can come together and demand for a lot more. As some of you might know, the French Yellow Vest movement was actually started by a petition. A petition to petition against proposed fuel taxes, and that petition got 1 million signers in a couple of weeks, and from there on their demands increased, people got on the streets, and essentially within a couple of weeks, they got the fuel taxes rolled back and put together much more comprehensive anti-austerity demands, and people rallied around that. So we have moment in our politics as well, where there is a huge moment for working people who are like, okay, the system is not working for us. Every time the market crashes, we lose everything, and the rich keep getting richer. So for that, we have made our demands more comprehensive, which would be updated on our website soon. But just to name a few of them, in addition to a freeze on rent, mortgages, and utilities, we have called for nationalization of healthcare and healthcare delivery mechanisms, just like Spain did, because it allows you to respond in a much faster, more efficient way to the crisis, immediately provide free testing and treatment for everybody, have a guarantee that I'm so sorry. Yeah, create a financial reconstruction committee, which will essentially enact a people's bailout instead of a corporate bailout, and no layoffs, no bailouts for any industry that is threatening layoffs. This and a full list of demands will also be emailed to you in a follow-up email, but we'll also update it on our website. Now, demands are good, but without a comprehensive strategy to meet those demands, we're not going to get anywhere. We believe that to get our demands passed, we need a national mass movement of people coming together on a broad set of goals, and not only think short term in how to help people through the crisis, but also long term in how to make sure that we never are in this position again. So that's where Rent Strike sees our role. Really, we know people are already ready to organize. All we are looking to provide is resources on how to go about organizing a rent strike. What is a rent strike? What are the potential consequences? And how will we take care of each other as we go through a rent strike? Just as a clarifying point, a rent strike is not just an inability to pay rent. A lot of people on the call, I know, will be struggling to pay their rent come April 1st. But if you are not able to pay rent because you don't have money, then you don't really have any leverage. A strike is when you or a mass of people withhold something they have, either their labor or their money, to get a few demands. So to get to that point, to have a rent strike, there is a lot of organization that everybody on this call will have to do with people in their building, other renters under your property management or landlords landlords jurisdiction under your landlord's properties, and you have to talk to them and get people who are willing to pay, able to pay, also withhold their rent, but it takes a lot of organizing, and that's what we are here to fill in the gaps for. And additionally, we are also looking to connect everybody who's going through a rough time with other mutual aid organizations. Like if there's people, we get a lot of emails from families, sometimes single parents who have kids and they are about to lose their home on April 1st. Unfortunately, we don't have the capacity right now to provide aid, but we will, and later in this call, we'll get your needs from you and we'll try and connect you with local and state mutual aid organizations, of which there are plenty, to help you through this rough time. And that's about me. That's about it from me in our introduction. The next section was supposed to be by Rook, but he hasn't been able to join us yet. So I'm going to give the mic to
Supreet. Rob is here. Rob is here.
Okay.
He wasn't able to join on the panelist Zoom call, but he is on the live stream. So is there any way you could let him in to speak?
Yeah, if he is.
Yeah, his name is not just Rob. What's he under?
I'm lowering.
Sorry, I just lowered all hands. Could Rob just raise your hand, please? I see him now. Allowed to talk and move to panelist. Just 1 second. Promote to panelist. Rob should be on soon. There you go. There's Rob. And I'll mute myself. Rob will be able to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about tenants organizing.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Okay. So my name's Rob Rook. I'm here in Oakland, California. I was active for about 10 years with the campaign for renters' rights that did direct action casework, fighting mostly against evictions. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm also a former executive board member with the Carpenters Union, and I was involved in the Wildcat Strike of about 5,000 construction workers in 1999. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about try to get a sort of a context from of where we're at. This is kind of where usually we start, is on the issue of it feels like we're in the biggest and most serious economic and health and political crisis that America has faced from the, okay, oh, I see. I'm sorry, my video started. How's that? Okay, yeah. There you go. Good? I'm so sorry about that. I'm a little older than perhaps most people, and I'm a little bad at at some of the technology. So I think we're in a huge crisis right now in the country, and I think the need to try and draw on experience from the past is a very important moment to try and figure that out. In Oakland, we did a lot of rent organizing, but it was primarily around evictions. And what our experience was during the 2000s was that when people are faced with evictions, that is usually the best time to organize people. We're in a bit of a different environment right now, where we're in a situation where a lot of people are going to be faced with not being able to pay the rent on April 1st, and then also come May 1st, hopefully we'll be in a situation where we'll be able to get large numbers of people to organize around the rent strike 2020. So in terms of our approach in Oakland in fighting evictions, we started by kind of trying to get an international and a historical view of rent strikes. And this country is not, rent strikes are not unknown in this country. There were massive strikes, primarily of tenants in the 1930s around the evictions. Most of those evictions were situations where large numbers of people were, in fact, in New York, for instance, there was up to 200,000 people were evicted during the Depression. And the Communist Party and other organizations worked to attempt to help them get back into their homes. And it was in that environment that you had a lot of clashes with the police, and people were able to put people back in their homes. Also internationally, there's been some very good experiences with strikes. If we look at the Glasgow Strike in 1915, I know that's going back a long way, but where women organized in a situation where there was rapidly rising rents, and where the women were able to organize a citywide strike in Glasgow, and where actually when those women were taken to court, the shipyard workers, who were their husbands and their sons and their brothers and so on, they actually went out on strike for a day and were able to help win that strike in 1915. Immediately following that, you had legislation passed because I think the ruling elite were really scared by that strike. And there was also a wave of strikes that took place through Britain at that time. Also in Barcelona in 1931, a similar situation where there was a citywide rent strike of about 100,000 people. More recently in Toronto, there was a couple of high-rise buildings that went on rent strike, again, against rent hikes. This is a bit of a new situation that we're facing coming up in April, tomorrow on April 1st, but also on May 1st, where we'll have a situation where there will be literally millions of people across the country who will have the choice between whether to pay for food or whether they should put their money to the rent. And quite frankly, I think large numbers of people are going to say, we need to keep our rent. In Toronto, the campaign that's a kind of a sister campaign to ours, Keep Your Rent is the slogan that they're using up there. And they have organized a large Facebook group. And I think that's something that we need to consider, is to organize city by city Facebook groups where we try and bring hundreds of people and thousands of people onto those groups so that people can air their hesitations, try and figure out the way forward, and so they can come together and see the kind of numbers that are involved. Because I think people feel very atomized, at least in those states where we're on a scenario of a shelter in place like we are here in Oakland. So, so I think that that in the period ahead, the big clash will be, or the big struggle will be, on the one hand, there's two component parts really, and I was kind of begin to end on this. The one element is to get people to join the strike. That will be very important. The other side of it is to get people to organize in their communities, in their buildings. During the kshamavsawant campaign in November, and prior to that, we did a lot of deep organizing where we got people to meet their neighbors, know who their neighbors are, and to connect with their neighbors. And in this situation, we can do that through Zoom, or we can do it by phone call, but we need to really try to organize from below as solidly as we can to defend those of us who are not able to pay rent come May 1st in particular. And so I think one of the things that we're fighting for is for people to self-organize and to prepare so that come May 1st, we're going to be in the strongest position possible. Just finally end on the one point about the organizing that we did in Oakland, and our experience there was that people will fight when they have no choice but to fight. All of our campaigns in the 2000s were around, primarily around people whose back were up against the wall and for whom they were facing homelessness. In that scenario, people will fight. And I think our role in this panel tonight is to try to help figure out how to strengthen that resolve to fight, bring people together and give them the confidence that they need to be able to stand up to the landlord, and to fight then for a common goal of getting the local governments, the state governments and the federal government to step in and say there shouldn't be any rent payments due on May 1st, and for a freeze of rent payments.
Thank you, Rob. So I have been keeping a slight eye on all the comments just to answer a few frequently asked questions that are here. A lot of people I see asking if there's something in their state or city. So follow up from this call would be, we'll be organizing state by state and bringing in existing organizations if there are any that are currently organizing for a rent strike, but that's where we'll have state by state organizing. Right now, I want to just clarify what rent strike is about and what rent strike means and what our capacity is. So I can pass it off next to Lee Carter from Virginia, who has called for a rent freeze, rent, mortgage, and utilities freeze in Virginia. So he can talk a little bit about his demands, where they're at, and how people on the call in Virginia can get involved.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Lee Carter. I'm a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. It's the lower half of the Virginia State Legislature. I am the only socialist elected to state level office in Virginia, and I believe the only one in any Southern legislature. And I just want to talk a little bit about sort of the state's response and the inadequacies of the state's response here in Virginia and also elsewhere. So the way that I've been approaching this crisis is thinking of it in 3 steps. The first is biological safety, right? So we have obviously a situation where there is a virus that's potentially lethal that's out there. And so the very first thing, the immediate concern that everyone needs to focus on is making sure that we are limiting infections as much as possible so that our healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed. Because what we've seen in other places is if the rate of people being hospitalized exceeds the hospital capacity, that's when you have a huge spike in deaths, right? That's why you have some places with less than 1% death rate from this virus, and other places with 9 or 10. So once the biological safety is taken care of, that's where you've got your shelter in place orders, your social distancing, sort of business closures to make sure that we're limiting people's exposure. Once that is in place, then the second step is to make sure that people's financial security is addressed during the duration of this crisis. And I want to make sure that everybody understands, we are not looking at this as a several week crisis. This is going to be months at a minimum. So Virginia actually, starting yesterday, went on a mandatory stay-at-home order. It is the longest in the country. It's set to expire on June 10th. And frankly, that is on the optimistic side. There are a lot of epidemiologists who have looked at this and said that we may be in a situation of rolling shutdowns where everybody locks down for a while, we get things under control, we open up a little bit, we lock back down, we open up a little bit, we lock back down, until there's a vaccine or a treatment, which could be quite a long time. So people's financial security is going to be incredibly important in the weeks and months to come, to make sure that people actually can abide by the stay-at-home orders. Because of course, most of the people that are going out now, it's not people going out to spring break. It's, not people going to the park because they want to. It's people that are going and looking for work because, they have bills that are due. And so this is where sort of the demands in Virginia are right now. We've just started to make these demands for things like a suspension of rent payments, mortgage payments, late fees, and evictions, and the reconnection of utility service for people that have had their utility service cut off already. And then the third step, once we've got that taken care of, is making sure that we rebuild an equitable economy, right? When this is over, we can't just go back to the conditions that we had before, because the conditions that we had before are what led us to a situation where we have massive layoffs. So we have massive amounts of people that are unable to pay the rent. We have, Congress passing a $2.2 trillion quote unquote aid package, the overwhelming majority of which goes to massive corporations on the promise that they won't lay people off. And of course, they're doing it anyway. So we need to make sure that over the long term, once this is said and done, we move to a situation where our economy is owned and operated by the workers, the people who are actually doing the work day to day. This can take a number of forms. I'm a proponent of worker cooperative ownership, but there are a lot of different ideas for how to do that. And when it comes to housing, because this is rent strike, we need to make sure that we have housing for use rather than housing for investment. Speculatory investors have been the number one driver of increased housing costs throughout the country. And it's the reason why here in Virginia, we currently have 11 empty houses for every homeless man, woman, and child. So we need to use this to make sure that we're fighting for a more just economy for the long run rather than just resetting. Now, I think it's important to think of this as a three-step process because people really don't have the energy to think about next year when they're worried about whether they're not going to be able to make the rent next month. And so this is sort of the strategic. We need to make sure that our demands are focused first and foremost on that biological safety, and then after that on making sure that people can weather this crisis, and then after that on making sure that we come out of this with a more just, more equitable society. So that's sort of where my thinking is strategically on this. Now, every state, of course, has a different response. Every state is in a different different phase of this. But frankly, all states' responses have been completely inadequate on the second and third parts, right? So financial security and on rebuilding a more just society. And this is where our power comes in. We act collectively. When those of us who can make the rent, withhold our rent until those demands are met, that's where we're actually going to be able to elicit that change. And, historically speaking, this is really a moment where the ruling class is up against the ropes. And it's not because of anything that we've done. It's just because of the reality of biological safety. They built a very, very fragile economy that is now collapsing around us. And that is why collective action right now is going to be extremely effective. And like Rob was saying, we have a lot of people that are sort of up against the wall right now as workers, as tenants. And that's when people are most willing to fight. So we have this confluence of people that have to fight. We have to fight for ourselves and our neighbors, and we have an opportunity to make that fight meaningful and actually win these changes. So for anyone out there who's wondering sort of what your rights are, it's important to understand that landlord-tenant law is dictated largely at the state level, so that will vary state by state. So it's important to reach out to mutual aid organizations that are in your area and the legal aid organizations that are in your area to get a local answer for what your rights are and where you are sort of in the state of organizing. So I believe that there is an effort by Rent Strike to collect information on affiliate mutual aid organizations. So this would be a great opportunity if you are plugged into a mutual aid organization like Food Not Bombs or Virginia Poverty Law Center or any organization like that. Please feel free to go to the Rent Strike website and provide your organization's information as an affiliate. If you are in need of mutual aid, please go to the Rent Strike website and find that list of affiliates in your area and reach out to them. They can provide you with the resources to make sure that you have food on the table, to make sure that you know your rights as a tenant, and to make sure that you're not fighting this alone. One of the things that we've seen here in Virginia is our courts are on what's called judicial emergency. So evictions are not being processed by the courts, but landlords can still file for eviction. They're just not being heard yet. We've also already seen some landlords trying to do what we call self-help evictions, which is just going in, moving all your stuff out into the yard and changing the locks. And so it's important to know what your rights are for the situation that you're in, because in the overwhelming majority of places, a self-help eviction is illegal. But if you're unable to pay rent right now, your landlord might be desperate. They might try a self-help eviction. They might not. They might just file an eviction and wait until the courts reopen in a few months. Either way, you need to know what your rights are so that you know how to fight back. So once again, go to the Rent Strike website, find that list of affiliates, and find your local legal aid or mutual aid organizations that are affiliated with Rent Strike 2020, and make sure you know how to fight back.
Yep, thanks, Lee. Again, everybody in the comments who's asking for mutual aid, I need help. We'll cover that later. I want to make sure that everybody has all the information that they need before I go into giving you how to organize and how to tell us that what help you need. Just kindly be patient. And there are certain trolls in the chat. Please ignore them. Don't feed the trolls. Next, we have, thank you, Lee, so much for taking the time to talk here. Next, we have Councilmember Kshama, who is also called for a rent freeze, and Seattle City Council, in large part due to her work, today signed a resolution asking Governor Jay Inslee and the federal government to freeze rents, utility, and mortgages. Councilmember Kshama, take it away.
Thank you, Supreet, and hello, everyone. My name is Kshama Sawant. As Supreet said, I'm a socialist city council member in Seattle, serving my third term. Rook mentioned our re-election campaign that we won last year, even though we had the whole of big business, including the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, using every trick in the book to get us out of City Hall. And we prevailed because of the kind of organizing efforts that Rob was mentioning. So there's a huge power in collective action to the extent that even though the big business elite and the political establishment have all this wealth, power, and political clout on their side, we can tip the scales in our favor if we get organized. But that's where I think that's the crux of tonight's conversation, because we all know we need to do this, but how are we going to do it, as Supreet was saying? And we working people right now are, in my view, not only facing a global pandemic, but also an economic crisis. In other words, we're not just facing COVID-19, we're facing the twin crises of COVID-19 and capitalism. And we're living those consequences. In Seattle, which was the initial epicenter of the crisis in the country, we've seen some of the first impacts of the pandemic. The first deaths happened here, but also we've seen the initial organizing efforts. We were one of the first cities to win the first eviction and foreclosure moratoria in the country. But I agree with all the speakers who've spoken so far. That's simply not enough. And I also agree with Lee Carter that most politicians, even in the Democratic Party establishment, they are not taking the kind of steps that they need to take. I mean, obviously, some small things are happening, but the question we should be asking is, are the politicians taking the steps that are commensurate with the scale of this crisis? I mean, the bottom is falling from our economy, and who's really paying the price for it? It's working people like us. And so if you measure it in that way, then no, the politicians are not going to deliver for us. We are going to have to get organized. And the projections for the United States are severe, first of all, on just the healthcare front. So I really 100% agree that with Supreet, when she mentioned that rent strike campaign, the movement is also standing for other demands like Medicare for all, because we know all of these are interlinked, and we are the majority that are getting slammed on various fronts. The corporate landlord is exploiting us, the bosses in the workplace are exploiting us, and we are facing the consequences of having a for-profit and privatized healthcare, which puts profits over lives. And we know the dire predictions for the infections and the deaths that are going to happen in the coming weeks. And I agree also, because of that, the period of social distancing actually has to go on. In fact, we have to completely reject what politicians like Trump, and even unfortunately some Democrats like New York Governor Cuomo are saying, oh, maybe we need to end this soon. Obviously, they're saying it not because they care about our jobs and our wages. They're saying it because their capitalist profit machine has come to a grinding halt, because working people are not going to go to work. And what a confirmation that it's workers who make the profits, not the billionaires. But we don't agree with them that we have to sacrifice our health and our lives and put our children and elderly at risk because they want to make profit. So which means that we are going to face a social distancing period of not weeks, but months. And then we're going to see the recession, which is almost like a depression, as was mentioned before. And so there's no question we need to get organized, but it's also strategically an incredible opportunity to also get organized on many fronts. And it's important that we're doing this on at least on March 31st. Tomorrow is April 1st. Millions of Americans are laid off with or without unemployment benefits. Many are going to be able to afford to pay. And I'm sure many on this call have had a hard time getting through even to the unemployment insurance office. So we have a long way to go and a lot to fight on. My Socialist City Council office and our organization, Socialist Alternative, which is a nationwide organization, but in Seattle, what we've done is we launched on Thursday afternoon, I sent a letter to the governor, and we launched an online public campaign demanding that the state governor, Jay Inslee, Washington state governor, immediately suspend all rent, mortgage, and utility payments for as long as the pandemic lasts. And I know there's a little bit of interchangeability here. People are saying rent freeze. What I mean by rent suspension is what I think some people are saying rent freeze, which is basically suspension of rent, mortgage, and utility payments means that you don't have to pay your rent at all that month for as long as that suspension lasts. And I want to be very clear, the kind of suspension we are demanding is people make no rent payments or no mortgage payments if you're a working class homeowner without adverse consequences like accruing back rent or incurring any other debts, eviction notices, or damage to credit rating. I mean, that's what we mean by suspension. In other words, it's a very powerful demand, because we're basically saying that this capitalist system has failed us, so the crisis should be paid for by the capitalists. In other words, the big banks that underwrite the mortgages, the mortgage holding banks, the corporate landlords, those are the individuals and corporations that have not just billions but trillions of dollars in cash reserves. They should be absorbing the cost of this crisis, not ordinary people, not middle class homeowners, or the vast majority of working class people who are renters, even some struggling small businesses. This is also an opportunity to build that kind of unity, and that's why we call for both rent and mortgage payments to be suspended. In the same petition, we are also calling for what most housing experts call a statewide rent freeze, meaning no rent increases through 2020. And the reason we had to, and this is astounding, to me even, the reason we had to call for this was because alongside so many people facing the problem of not having any income to pay rent in the coming months, because we are living paycheck to paycheck, on top of that, many people are reporting to my office that their corporate landlords have already sent them notices for rent increases starting in April or May. I mean, this is just shockingly, I'm not surprised, but it's shockingly unconscionable. So we're also rejecting that. And I wanted to report also that, just like the petition that Josh Collins and Rent Strike campaign have circulated throughout the nation, which has become so successful, which is why we're here tonight talking like we are one movement. Similarly, the petition that we circulated here statewide has gathered now nearly 8,000 signatures, and people are just chomping at the bit to really fight alongside one another. And there's anger that big banks and Wall Street are going to get trillions of dollars in bailouts, and the rest of us are going to be left bereft of any support. And the support that the federal government is providing is not going to be enough. It's a one-time payment of $1,200. It's important, it's there, but as Robert Reich said, it's an insult to tell working people who have to survive without income for who knows how many months that you're going to have a one-time payment. So we really have to fight back, there's no question. And I think Rob made some really important points about how we can get organized on a concrete level. This will be crucial. So I just wanted to just echo some of those points, because as Supreet said, we're not just saying, oh, I can't pay rent as an individual renter. In that sense, we have no, as we all know, we have no power against our corporate landlords as an individual tenant. So it's a question of, are we going to do a non-payment of rent campaign? That's what a rent strike is. And we have to build up to the point where we have a really solid campaign by May 1st, and that calls for a serious need to get organized. This is not going to be it can be done. It's going to be extremely exciting. It is going to really make sort of be the antidote to the demoralization that a lot of people are facing. But we also have to be sober about the kind of serious organizing that we need to do. Rent strike means we get organized and take action, just like any workplace strike action, except probably more complicated because we're not all in a workplace. And so what does it mean to actually get organized? Like what does concretely does it mean? Rob correctly mentioned the question of setting up a Facebook group. Lots of Facebook groups have been set up. I think there's one in Seattle as well, and many other cities have set up. Hopefully those links are being shared amongst all of us so that we remain in touch. I just wanted to mention this can be a very powerful organizing tool. By itself it won't be enough, but organizing a Facebook group can be powerful because it allows for discussions of strategies and tactics, allows for political cohesion in the movement. The West Virginia public teachers strike action, and now the Instacart shopper strike action, so inspiring. Both are examples of concrete strike actions that have started with a Facebook group where they slowly but surely got organized, bringing everyone together, winning people over on the same demands, discussing their tactics and so on. So that's the kind of approach we will need, a very systematic and serious approach to organizing. We obviously need to get organized nationally. We need to have more meetings like we are having tonight. We need to get organized statewide and locally and in our building. I mean, I'll just say, if you're the only tenant in your building that is going on a rent strike, you're going to be very vulnerable. So Our goal, each of us who are tenants in a building, our immediate goal should be to contact our fellow tenants, asking them how they're doing. Are they going to be able to pay their rent? Will they get involved in this campaign? Share information with them. The other thing that we should be doing, in addition to that, also we should contact friends in neighboring buildings. And then also there's another avenue that we should try to explore. In Seattle, for example, there's a slumlord called Carl Hageland. He owns a huge number of buildings throughout the city. And often what these slumlords will do is that they will have separate LLC companies, small companies that own small numbers of buildings. But there's a way to find out if you spend a little bit of time doing an internet search, you can find out if a certain LLC traces back to that same slumlord. So if we are able to, in some shape or form, organize the tenants who are all tenants of the same slumlord or of the same corporate landlord, who also, corporate landlords also own many buildings in any given city, that's an excellent strategy. Because if the majority of the tenants in the buildings owned by a single landlord, corporate landlord or slumlord, are getting organized, that's a big punch. It's a really punchy way of fighting back. And so, I'm sure Supreet and others are going to talk about more ideas for getting organized, but these were some starting points. Just a couple more points before I stop. One, I really think it's important that mutual aid was mentioned, because it shows the incredible compassion and caring that working class people are capable of, despite the adversities we face. I mean, we're the ones who take on all the miseries of the system, and we're the ones showing one another that kind of the feeling of being a society that the system doesn't show towards us. Compare that to the mean-spiritedness and selfishness of the corporate landlords, big banks. I mean, these are some of the most rapacious corporations. Let's be clear. The landlords and the big banks that own properties, these are some of the worst plunderers of this economy. So we're showing a real contrast to that, and we're really coming out ahead in terms of the moral and political righteousness about that. But I would say, in addition to mutual aid, it's incredibly necessary to get politically organized for collective action on demands like rent strike, on demands like, for example, in Seattle, we are building a campaign to tax Amazon and big businesses to fund COVID-19 relief. It's really important that we get organized around these political demands. Similarly, the Instacart shoppers who are going on strike, Amazon workers who are going on strike, these things are important because, mathematically speaking, we don't have the wealth and the money. The billionaire class has all the, most of the wealth and money. That's the nature of the capitalist system. All of the wealth is siphoned off to the top. So we cannot limit ourselves to helping one another, because we are all at rock bottom. And so for every one that gets helped through mutual aid, there will be 1,000 that are falling through the cracks. So in addition to those neighborhood efforts that are so incredibly important, we also should spread the word about political organizing, because that's when we will bring many of the people from the bottom. If we win a tax on big business, that will bring a lot of working class people in Seattle, from rock bottom. If we win a rent strike, it will be a big blow to corporate landlordism. So, looking at it from that lens, I think the effort that has been started by Supreet and Josh Collins and others is just commendable. I'm so excited and grateful to be here as part of this. And somebody has mentioned in the chat threads, about May 1st strike actions. I think that's really important. You noticed how Trump was saying everybody should go back to work at Easter. Then he got a lot of pushback. Now he's saying everybody go back to work at the end of April. Of course, we don't accept that. But, we're thinking, what comes at the end of April is May 1st. So absolutely, we should be, it should be a strategic date for us. May 1st should be a strategic date for strike actions by renters, by workers in the workplace, and so on. So we have a lot of work to do between now and May 1st. And I'm really looking forward to, continuing this organizing and the conversation. And the last thing I wanted to say is, those of you who are in Seattle or Washington State or even outside, if you want to reach out to my office for anything, if you want, if you don't know whom to contact, but you want a starting point, please make sure you contact my office, where we will sort of, send you to the different places where you can get organized. Thank you, and solidarity.
Councilmember, do you want to give information on how they could reach your office?
Yes, you can. Actually, it's very easy. Can I just say, just Google my name, and you will find the email address, phone number. And right now we are so overwhelmed. So if you can just email us, it may take us a couple of days to respond, but we will be there.
Thank you. All right, so all the questions I just shared, there were questions about mutual aid, local groups, and how to organize and whether or not you should pay your rent on April 1st. The next section of our call will cover all your answers. And yes, Kshama is awesome, as somebody said. Okay, so the first toolkit that I want to share with you, I'm putting it in the chat. And I know there's a lot of people are posting there. So if you could stop for a second so everybody can see this. It is tinyurl.com/rs-organizing toolkit. It's tinyurl.com/rs-organizing toolkit. Now, this is our first draft. We did not plan to share this today, but because of how many people are asking us, I want to make it very clear that this is an evolving document that we'll keep changing and building on as more and more needs are identified. But this document highlights a few points: what is at stake, our demands, our theory of change, how to organize a successful rent strike, and what Rent Strike 2020 can offer you in that effort. So we've already covered what's at stake in our demand. I'll just briefly go over our demands because I didn't remember all of it off the top of my head, but just to lay it out for everybody. Our demands are freeze all rent, mortgage, utility payments, or we will carry out a rent strike. Freeze all student, medical, car, and consumer debt and interest during the ongoing pandemic and recession. Cancel student debt. Tax big business and the rich, not regular people, to pay for this crisis. House all unsheltered people to protect their health and safety and public health at large. Suspend all farm service agency payments to ensure that we have an uninterrupted food supply. Provide free mass testing and treatment. Authorize the centers of Medicare and Medicaid services to cover all out-of-pocket expenses so people can get tested and treated without worrying about going bankrupt. Medicare for all. Give democratic power to committees of workers and scientists over the response to the crisis in essential industries, including healthcare, transportation, logistics, and groceries. Nationalize any industry threatening layoffs that hasn't been bailed out under democratic workers' control, and end mass incarceration systems and immediately release all immigrants from detention centers. The last one is because immigrants in detention centers and Black and brown people and Native people in prison, nobody is thinking about them. If a guard catches COVID-19, it's extremely close quarters, and they're the first. They're usually treated as dispensable in the society, and we want to make sure that our demands include them. This is no time to be wasting money on incarcerating people, but we should rather use that money for public health and taking care of our financial crisis. That is our initial list of demands. Theory of change is very clear. We want to build a national movement. Now, the next section of the rent strike actually talks about how to organize a successful rent strike. You can go through this document in your own time when you get time as well, but I'll go over the major steps that you will need to think about. If you are one of the people who are unable to pay your rent on April 1st, if you withhold your rent just by yourself, your landlord has immense power over you. They can evict you, just like Lee mentioned. They'll do self-service or self-help evictions, or they'll just be like, if they cannot evict you right now, they will wait until the courts open to do so, and right after the crash you will without be in a worse position. So if you are in that position, the first thing you should do is plan and prepare. Collect all the resources that you would need to start organizing a rent strike. We have links to resources in the document that I just shared, but essentially what you need to think about is you have to have conversation with people in your building, your neighbors, or other renters under your property management company's purview. So how do you reach out to them? Certain people mentioned Zillow and what's it called? Nextdoor that I use as well. Just be prepared. Nextdoor is a lot of homeowners on there. You will get a lot of pushback. Just ignore those, put this stuff out, and you will get a few people, and that's where you can start. So these are remote ways to start contacting people who you can organize with. But you can also, if you practice proper social distancing, like wear gloves, wear a mask, stay 6 feet away, you can start knocking on your neighbors' doors in your building and say, hi, how are you doing? Take a piece of paper with you, write down their name of their apartment number or building, write down their name, and take notes on where they are at. Will you be able to pay your rent on April 1st? How about May 1st? Are you in a fear of losing your job? Are you insured in case you get sick? If we decide to go on rent strike in solidarity with those who cannot pay their rent, to suspend their rent, would you participate and keep their responses organized? That is step one, because you have to have a place to start with, group of people to start with. Also know that a lot of people will not immediately be on board. Don't worry, they'll come on board as, a lot of people need things to happen to them before they see the light. So start with people who you can manage. Connect and build. There is a lot of resources on the flyers you could use to put in your building, on what script to follow when you're contacting people, and how to convince those who are on board. The best convincing tool that you have, just one thing for everybody on the call, it has been scientifically proven that arguing with somebody just with facts does not change their mind. When two people enter a debate or an argument, both of them leave the argument even more committed to their previous belief. So how do you convince people and bring them to your side? It is by modeling vulnerability. That means tell your story. Talk about, I am a single parent, or I have 3 kids, both me and my partner lost my jobs, and there are many people like us who won't be able to pay rent and our landlord is not budging. Make it personal and then connect it to the story of everybody, that all of us are much closer to homelessness than we think. So solidarity is what we've got. Use those personal stories to convince people. And of course, people won't come around on the first time, but when you tell them your personal story, it will be something that will stick with them. And the thing that they will remember after you leave is how you made them feel. Of course, there will be antagonistic people, racist, sexist people who would try to immediately attack you and will not engage in good faith. Just, I know it's hard, but try to brush off and move on to the people who you think will be more agreeable to you. Once you have an initial list of tenants that are at least curious about rent strike, have the first tenants organizing meeting. Now, because we're in COVID-19, if you can, try to have like a remote meeting, either set up a WhatsApp group or Facebook group, and start or talk conversations there. Now, for people who asked if there are any groups in their cities, we have not yet compiled the entire list, but we have volunteers who are currently doing that, and we'll ask some of you to help with that effort as well. But our goal is to compile all these all the different Facebook groups that are already started, so we can start sharing those lists with you at a state by state or city by city level. Once you have that initial conversation, begin a discussion, it's unlikely that you will have full agreement at the first meeting. Before you leave the first meeting, schedule a follow-up, build momentum between the first meeting and the follow-up meeting by talking to more people, telling them, hey, we have 5 people who already are on board, because sometimes people want to make sure that other folks are involved and it's not just them. And use precautions. Please visit CDC website or World Health Organization website to know the proper safety precautions while you're organizing. It doesn't help you, your family, or any of us if you expose yourself to COVID-19. When you have a majority of tenants well organized to carry a rent strike, that's when you notify your landlord and wait. In our organizing toolkit, there's a letter attached that you can send to your landlord and sign your either say that, hey, we have formed a union, this is our demand, and if you could sign your name to it, and or just your whatever you decide to call your tenants union. There's a few optional reading links as well that we reviewed a few other tenants organizing guides, and the ones that are really helpful, we have attached them as well for you to use. Now, what can Rent Strike 2020 offer in this? If you are hosting an organizing event, we hope to build an organizing team within Rent Strike that can help local tenants that are trying to organize by making calls to people who have signed our petitions in your area. So if if you're organizing, say, in Oakland, California, we'll just go download the list of people in Oakland, California who have signed our petition and make calls on your behalf and connect them to your effort. We will send emails on your organizing events on your behalf to the universe that makes sense. And hopefully we hope to buy a texting service so we can send texts on different actions to our list. If you're an individual who is unable to pay rent, we will connect you to people in your area who are offering mutual aid. A couple of times during this live stream, I have already shared a link of state-by-state mutual aid efforts. Those are not put together by Rent Strike. I found it in one of the other socialist organizing spaces. So I'm sharing this with you, but just being very clear that this is not put together by Rent Strike. All of the links that I'm posting about here, we'll put it in the YouTube description. And if that's not possible, we'll definitely send a follow-up email to everybody who registered with the links and resources that we're talking about. So just bumping the mutual aid document again in the chat. It has state-by-state mutual aid information. The Rent Strike website link is expired, but everything else should be there. All right. After we're done here, I will open it up for questions. Let me just go through the rest of the agenda. We need your help because organizing at a national level takes a lot of work. All of us have full-time jobs and are doing this in volunteer capacity in our free time. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to hire 2 full-time organizers who will be able to support all your efforts. But the next thing that I want to put on here for you is mutual aid polls. So I know a lot of people in the chat mentioned that they are going to be not able to pay their rent or are struggling in other ways. I am pasting a link in the chat. It's tinyurl.com/rs-help. tinyurl.com/rs-help. I'm pasting it again because people keep responding after that. Yep, and that is a form that you can fill out. So we can, what we will do is look at all the mutual aid organizations that have already reached out to us to say that they are looking to help people in their area. So we'll be connecting you with them because we do not have the volunteer capacity right now to support mutual aid efforts, but we want to help you as much as we can. For people who are really struggling and there is no mutual aid organization in your area, we'll try and fundraise for you on our social media website. Just put up a fundraiser, and that's the way that we can help to those who need help. That is one poll, and the next form that I want to link is actually our volunteer form, because as I mentioned, we need all of your help. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. The link is tinyurl.com/rs, no, hyphen, it's not organized. Oh, it is organized, never mind. tinyurl.com/rs-organize. One second. I think that is the Renstrike. Oh, my bad. The one that I just said right now, tinyurl.com/Renstrike-organize is the link to sign up if you are interested in leading a Rent Strike effort in your area. We will be reaching out to you and helping you throughout the process. The toolkit was just an overview, but we'll also do a lot of one-to-one connection, also connect with other tenants organizers that agree with our goals and motives, because we have a pretty comprehensive set of demands and we have a leave nobody behind sort of approach. So there will be a lot of people who are like, I don't give a shit about prisoners, then we can't organize with you, but everybody else is welcome. Again, it's tinyurl.com/rs-organize. Fill this form out if you need help, if you can lead the effort of Rent Strike organizing in your area, your building, your city. We need you to take charge so we can basically connect you with all the different organizations that are already working. And like somebody mentioned, I think it was Kshama before, that rules will be very different. It was Rob. Rules will be very different based on which city and state you are in, on evictions and what rights you have. That is why we'll be organizing state by state. Future calls will be more interactive, smaller, and state by state, so we can actually have a conversation. This was more of an introductory call, so everybody would know who's behind this, what we are trying to do, and give you all the tools that we have at our disposal right now. All right. And the last link that I'm going to share with you is the one where I need all of your help. It is tinyurl.com /rs-volunteer. I just pasted it in the chat again. I am pasting it again. If you can help us make sure that we are able to reach out to all the organizations that we need to bring in the fold, to do outreach calls to people who have signed our petitions. If there is a rent strike being organized in their area, and we need graphic designers, web developers, web security people, people who can help us with moderation on our Discord and Facebook groups, and there's a few more things, but it's on the volunteer form. It is tinyurl.com/rs-volunteer. So all these links will be sent in a follow-up email. They will also be on our in the description on YouTube and our Facebook pages wherever we have shared this. If you volunteer, we'll bring you into our Discord. That's where a lot of the organizers reside. Right now, we don't have the capacity to bring all 1.8 million people who signed the petition initially. So we are going to let the city by city and state by state organizing happen on Facebook, but we want our organizers to be in one place. So we'll send you a link to join our Discord if you sign up to volunteer. With that being said, I want to open up the floor for questions. Again, we can't take all questions. Please use the Q&A section. If we can't get to all the questions, we can still download a CSV of all the questions that have been posted, and we'll be able to respond to them either in an FAQ, or if we can do one-on-one outreach, then we'll respond by email. But if not, we'll put together an FAQ with all the questions that you have entered so far. We have 19 minutes left. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions. I'll go through the Q&A first for people who have already responded. I'll put down everybody's hands now. If I can just get my mouse to work. Okay. Now, if you have questions, please raise your hand, but I'll go to the Q&A section first. All right. Okay. First question, do you have national legal support set up for striking tenants? We do not. And for this as well, we will be looking for partnering organizations that are already doing legal support, and just list them on our website in case you need help and connect you to them as is necessary. We are primarily an organizing group because we are all organizers. What we can help you with is how to organize your communities, how to do help each other through this crisis, how to not let social distancing become social isolation. That's where we come in. From Texas, apartment communities only waiving late fees, no rental forbearance whatsoever. What can we do? Organize with your other tenants. Fill out the form that I talked about, tinyurl.com/rs-organize if you're willing to lead that effort, and then we can connect with you and connect you with other petition signers in your area as well, so you can organize together. Hello, I wanted to see if you're collaborating with the Right to City or Homes for All alliances. Yep, I had an awesome conversation with the Right to City political director or organizing director. One of them, Davin is his name. We have not been able to get on a call yet, but that is definitely on our agenda because we have very similar goals. Like, goals are absolutely aligned, and so is our theory of change. So they'll be definitely a big partner going forward if they agree. My sister lives in Poughkeepsie, New York, not freezing her rent. They will only give a 10% reduction. Again, we'll work with organizing. So I'm going to move on to questions that are not repetitions. So shout out for Rob from somebody. Is there a current plan to start this strike tomorrow? No, like whether or not you can start strike tomorrow depends on where you are at in your organizing. So if there is an already active tenants organizing group union in your area that has been organizing for a long time and is ready to go on strike, which is the case in certain areas in LA, Bay Area, and in New York, they are going to go ahead with their rent strike. But if you have not been contacted and you are the first person who has thought of this, I don't think you can call it a strike. If you're unable to pay for rent, we can try and connect you to mutual aid organizations. And if there is none that exists, we can make a fundraiser for you to help you with rent. Is mutual aid resource, I already posted about mutual aid resources. I'll send it in the follow-up as well. I'll just take 6 more minutes to read Q&A, and then I'll go to the people who have raised their hands. Can someone post the links for petitions and the organization website? It's rentstrike2020.org, and the petitions are on our website as well. When will the petitions go out for signature? They have been out for a while. That's how you got this email. It's a petition, you got an invite. Have policymakers looked into using antitrust protection against local institutional landlords? I will let the policymakers talk on this. Anybody, Lee or Kshama? There's a question if you have looked into using antitrust protection against local institutional landlords.
To my knowledge, there's been no effort to do that in Virginia. Of course, this would be a locality by locality thing. There are federal antitrust laws. There are also in some states some state antitrust laws, and so the applicability of those laws would very much change from place to place. So that's the sort of thing that you're going to have to get in touch with your local elected officials to find out whether they're looking at doing that.
Yep, and this Spencer was from Washington. He said Washington Constitution specifically protects against these sorts of monopolistic tendencies. So maybe you can connect with Kshama, Spencer. May Day seems like a very appropriate time for strike. Awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the strike aspect. A call for a general strike has to come from workers and labor unions. That is why we are not explicitly saying, yay, general strike, because we have no power, in the sense that I'm not a part of organized labor or work in the trades that are currently on the front lines in this COVID-19 response. But if there is a call on May 1st for a general strike, Rent Strike 2020 is fully prepared to back that up with all the resources that we have. Although I do agree with this movement and the need for dire necessity, what consequences come with losing? Yeah, so it is a very important conversation to have, and we should go in this with eyes all open, that if the possible consequences of organizing a rent strike is retaliation from the landlord. If they could either just retaliate the people who are leading the rent strike organizing efforts, or everybody who participates in a rent strike. So what we have to leverage against them is just our collective power. And if your landlord tries to evict you and you have to stage a protest to stop that from happening, that is an action where it doesn't just have to be renters in that building. Everybody from your city can come in. That's where our lists of millions of people will be very useful. If you are being evicted, and hopefully if we are not in lockdown when that happens, we'll try to organize as many people as we can to stand in solidarity and carry out a strike. But yes, there's a very real chance that you'll be retaliated against, as is with every strike that you have, which is why community resilience is very important. And that's what we hope to build with partnering with mutual aid organizations, that if you are retaliated against, at least you have a place to stay while you fight out your case. At least there's somebody who opens up their home for you and your family to stay. So we are thinking of contingency plans because we very much anticipate retaliation. Can you add the stop of car insurance and utilities? It is on there, Beth. Can you connect us to people organizing in your state? If you sign up to lead organizing efforts in your city, then yep, that is a part of it. You can do that by going to tinyurl.com/rs-or-organize. Fill out that form, and that'll start you on the process of connecting with people who are in your city organizing. List of links will be emailed. You're helping everywhere in Michigan. Yeah, we're trying to help people organize wherever they are at. Okay. Database of links and local state-by-state laws. Kate, that's an excellent idea. We will make sure that it's on our website, and we'll get working on that after the call. We are building a database of groups and mutual aid organizations. Hadn't thought about local and state-by-state laws governing tenants' rights. We'll get on that as well. Thank you, Kate. What strategy should those with mortgages take? Similarly, connect with homeowners, other homeowners in your area, knocking on doors and asking, hey, where are you at? Can you pay your mortgage bill? Can you pay your utilities bill? How would you feel about organizing a mortgage strike? in solidarity with people who are not able to pay right now, to demand a rent freeze. Now, the leverage that you have is your money, right? If you don't have money, then you are not the one who can have any leverage over your landlord. You have to bring in people who have the ability, but we'll be like, nope, suspend rent and mortgages for those who cannot pay, at least at the landlord level. And then we will continue paying. And the landlord will think, okay, at least I get 50% of people paying me rent rather than 0%. And that is the best case scenario. We'll see how many best case scenarios we end up with. All right, now I'm going to go to people who have raised their hand. Rob has something to say, and he's the expert on this. So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I think the first phase is, of course, getting people not to pay. I think on May 1st, there will be tens of millions who cannot pay. So that's actually already up and rolling, likely. The next phase will be some 10 days later or more before you actually get an eviction notice. And I think the very first thing on eviction defense that we always tell people, don't leave. Do not leave your place. Once you've left the place, there's no getting back in. So sometimes there is getting back in, but generally it's harder to get back in. And if you're on a lockdown, it's going to be very unlikely the sheriff is going to want to go inside your home. So I think once the lockdown opens up, once we get back out on the streets, then we're going to be able to organize in large numbers, not just to stop evictions, but also foreclosures as well. So.
And also there is somebody in the chat saying, don't pay. Please don't pay attention to those people. You have to organize and have more people joining in on that effort. You have no protection if it's not each other. You need solidarity and comfort of your community. All right, so now I'm going to the people who have raised their hands. We have 9 minutes, so I might not be able to get to everybody. Please, I apologize. Sandy Rowley, gonna unmute you. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Sandy.
Okay, hey, thank you so much for doing this. My question is, you state on the website that also included in the demands are to end the mass incarceration system and immediately release all immigrants from detention centers. Are you talking about the detention centers on the border or all inmates throughout all prison systems?
All. That's what we're calling for, all, because they're in the.
Why?
If it's about health and safety of all people, that's what we believe in. Because from inmates, it goes to guards, and they take it to their communities. It is.
Yeah, but these are rapers, murderers, child molesters. Why would you want them out? They're already segregated inside.
I have muted Sandy only because we are socialists. We believe, at least everybody who organized this, and we believe in a decarceral system, and nothing about the U.S. prison system prevents crimes that they just mentioned. Next is Mark. I'm allowed you to talk. Go ahead, Mark. Yep.
Yes. So I was wanting to know that, with this new bill that was passed in the legislation, is it possible for the apartment owners to get to file for business loans that'll pay, that they can, they keep their employees on, but it will help pay for their mortgages, stuff like that, to cover the cost of us not paying rent. So they're not making any, extra additional income, but they're getting their personal mortgages may be paid for. But if they can do that, then is there a way for us to ensure that those of us that are able to pay maybe too much rent, that they're not getting money off of it from the government to say for our donations or our rents being paid, that it's taken out of that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take this one if you don't mind. So the CARES Act is the name of that law that passed through Congress recently. The thing is massive. I mean, it's a $2.2 trillion spending bill. So frankly, I don't think there's anyone who would be able to answer that off the top of their head at this point. Even the people who wrote it probably wouldn't be able to answer that off the top of their head at this point. But you do have a very, very solid insight there. I do think, just going off intuition from the way that laws are made, it's very, very likely that the landlords have lobbied to get a way to double dip, to get the federal relief money and also still collect rent. So that is something that I will be looking into. It's probably pretty likely. I can't answer definitively, but Just gut feeling, it's pretty likely that you're right.
Yep. And I did not think, just to clarify on the previous question, I immediately muted because this is going live on a lot of different platforms and we don't need misinformation about the prison system out as a part of rent strike. Just for everybody, if you have policy disagreements, we can have an offline call, but we are not just going to broadcast it from our platforms. And we believe in a non-carceral solution. It's not about, if this is truly about health and safety of all, then, and human rights, then yes, prisoners do have human rights as well. All right, thank you, Mark, for your question. Kshama, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, so my lease is up May 1st, and we're supposed to find 2 more roommates before May 1st, and we have to like pay rent. So I'm just wondering, like, what should we do, like, moving forward?
Rob, do you have any substantial answer to that? Because if lease is up on May 1st, anywhere that people would want to go, like a re-enter lease, there is so much like front-end costs, like deposits and first and last month, and people probably won't have it. The best answer I have is we can connect you to mutual aid groups in your area if you fill out the mutual aid form. Do you have a better answer?
Yeah, I think what landlords will tend to do in April and in May is they're going to take people's security deposits. They're going to use those security deposits, so they will get their money. I believe that's what they'll be doing. I think for us, we're in a very new situation, and we're in a very volatile situation. And I think the main thing is to stay put. If you're not in a shelter-in-place state, it's a little bit different. But if you're in a shelter-in-place state, you are not going to be. It's very unlikely that, as I said, the sheriff's going to come into your house and get you out. I think the main thing is to organize. And if you're in, 42% of renters live in buildings with 5 or more units. Even if that's not the case, you can still. You have neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. Get as much support as you can.
Thank you. We can just take one more question. Everybody who I cannot call on, please put your questions in the Q&A section, because we can get that in a CSV format and we can answer them after the call. I'll call on Yolanda. Yolanda, go ahead and unmute yourself. Yolanda? All right, we can move on to Brian Walcott. Brian, go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, yeah, thanks for taking my question. So my question is in regards to kind of like some other kind of like parallel organizing that has been happening. As far as like, I've been mostly working with the 5demands.global with like, you know, those demands and that kind of like grassroots organizing that is really kind of parallel and works well with a lot of what the Rent Strike 2020 thing is doing. But I just want to make sure that things aren't like, you know, layering on top of each other, that we're not doing the same work. So yeah, I'm just trying to figure out exactly how to work together and have that be, yeah.
Yeah, Brian, are you a member of any organization that is already doing this effort, organizing?
Yeah, so I mean, the 5demands.global is kind of like a grassroots group of like, you know, autonomous individuals, and like, you know, I'm kind of like part of like Olympia Rent Strike, and we're kind of like formalizing, but we aren't like part of, you know, I'm part of the IWW local and stuff like that, but like that's kind of like a different genre, you know. So we're kind of formalizing now, but we don't have like a formal group, and yeah.
Yep. So that is I hope a lot of people on this call filled out our volunteer form as well, because that is a part of the work that we need to do. The moment that we realize it's time for now is to bring together all these organizing efforts that are happening, like that have been happening, tenants organizing, and bring them to the national level, like elevate and connect. In some cases, there is multiple tenants unions or multiple organizations working on a certain version of the demands already. So a part of the research work that we need to do is put together this and start outreach. If folks on the call can go to tinyurl.com /RS-volunteer and check the I'll do outreach to organizations box, then that's the work that you would be doing or helping us do. So we have no intention of reinventing the wheel if there is already an existing organization that agrees with our demands. But like I mentioned, there'll be a lot of people who will try to make our demands more conservative, who will be like, yeah, why are you doing that? Like, and why not just ask for this because it's more achievable? Because a good response that gets majority, that creates a sort of national movement, a good agenda, make sure that nobody is left behind, and we will not compromise on that. We are willing to have conversations and bring people on board to our point of view, but we are determined to stick to the comprehensive set of demands that we have put forth.
Yeah.
And if yours are more radical, we'll make ours more radical with you. We should have that conversation together. But that's the part of outreach work that will be happening over the next month as we build up to May 1st.
Great. Yeah, I just want to talk about, and we can talk later about like the hotline and stuff, because we also actually already have one set up, but we should just
let's connect on that. Yep.
Great.
It's 6:30. I want to respect everybody's time. I'll send everybody a follow-up email with all the links we mentioned, the toolkits and resources. Please share information. Please share that with as many people as you can, and also share our website, rentstrike2020.org, so we can get more people signing that petition, so we can connect you with more people in your city. And that's about it. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's 9:30 Eastern time. Sorry, I'm in Washington State. Thank you so much to all our panelists, Rhonda and Oz, for last minute jumping on board and helping us manage this tech stuff after everything went to hell, because we got 11,000 people sign up overnight. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I will stay in touch, and y'all are awesome. Bye.
Thanks. Good night.